It's not about how you are expressing your decision, communicating your decision to others. It's about self-trust. It's about really honoring and believing you are making the best possible decision right now in this moment with what you know and with who you are right now. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo, and today we're going to talk about something that I think relates to everybody, and that is how to make decisions confidently. This is something that I think we struggle with the big decisions in our life, but it can also take a toll on all those little tiny decisions that we're making every day. I'm excited that you're here. I think there's going to be some new ideas for you to consider when you're making your decisions. But before I dive in, I just want to say if you're new to the podcast, I'm so glad you're here and thank you for joining. I'm Tosca DiMatteo. I'm the founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I do work at the intersection of personal growth and professional breakthroughs. So whether that's one-on-one coaching, hosting masterclasses for your team, speaking on stages, or hosting this podcast, the work that I do is to help you get unstuck and to help you reach your goals, however you define them. If you want to learn more, visit CoachTosca.com. That's Coach TOSCA.com. Okay, so here's the thing. When I start working with my one-on-one clients, oftentimes they're in a situation where they have some big decisions to make. And it's usually causing a lot of stress and overwhelm. And one of the very first things that I do in whatever that situation might be is I really evaluate with that client. Does this decision have to be made like right now? Is this actually really imminent? Because what I often say to my clients is you don't have a decision to make until you have a decision to make. So part of this conversation is really first and foremost about asking yourself, do I actually have to make this decision right now or next week? Or do I actually have time? Because it is the time pressure that we put on ourselves unknowingly that can create that stress when we don't have to. So, hot tip, number one tip right out of the gate is really ask yourself, what is the truth about the timeline of making a decision? I think this alone can reorient what's going on for you. And this concept applies to both decisions, big and small. It can apply to where do I want to live next? Or which job do I want to take, A or B? But it can also relate to the small things in life, like what do I want for lunch? And I say the small ones because oftentimes the small decisions is where we can practice some of the mindsets and reframes and tips that I'll share with you today. One of the things I'm often suggesting to my clients when they're having a hard time to know what decision to make on the big things is I say, why don't you start to practice being very intentional about the small decisions that you make? Because that will allow you to pay attention to your body and how you feel when you make those decisions. It may sound a little bit silly, but if you actually consider, oh, okay, what do I want for dessert? Do I want a banana or do I want an ice cream? Your body is going to have a different response to one versus the other. And the one that feels more exciting and more open, and the one that like your eyes open wider to, for example, that's probably an indication that that's actually what you really want. So we can start to practice sensing what feels right and best to us with our decisions with these smaller decisions. So let me just start with that. And you know what? We're at this time in the season here in the US where it's vacation season. And I think what happens a lot of times is people are like, I'm going to go on vacation and I'm going to figure out some shit while I'm on vacation, right? We use this as, oh, I'm going to be away. And therefore I can really focus on making these decisions I need to make in my life. And actually, that can often ruin the downtime that we're giving ourselves because we're bringing in the baggage of these choices that we need to make. And my guess is, while we're actually on vacation, that's not when we actually need to make decisions. You know, it might be down the line. It might be when we come back. It might be a week from then or a month from then. We don't always have to make it. in these situations in which we're actually giving ourselves permission to take a break. When we do things like this is just an example, but we're basically forcing figuring something out versus allowing ourselves to come to a decision naturally. I mean, how many times has it happened to you, right? Like you're trying to figure something out, you're trying to come up with an idea, whatever the thing might be, and you have your aha moment. And it's not when you're actually thinking about the thing, it's when you've allowed your mind to wander or rest. That idea of the ideas in the shower, or you come to that decision as you're sitting at the beach and you realize and it just kind of drops in like, oh, like this is the thing I need to do. I have this example that I'll share. It's a little bit of a different type of example of putting pressure on yourself when you really don't need to. The example in my own life is there was a couple of years ago that I had a big, birthday. And I was like, okay, I know that I need to really figure out what my big dreams are. I need to really dream big. I need to really figure out what is that, North Star that I'm going to. And literally on my birthday, my husband and we went to the top of a mountain up in upstate New York. And I was just there and I was just like, okay, I have to figure this out. What are my dreams? I felt like I had to name it all so that I can then put the plans in place to pursue it, on this like milestone birthday. That was putting a lot of pressure on myself and I was forcing like this vision for my life versus the idea that I could just acknowledge and be aware of thoughts that came into my head, feelings that I had about things, paying attention to what excited me in the journey of my year versus figuring it out on day one, you know? And I was actually like sitting on top of this mountain, with Ryan. And I was like, I just got to figure out what I want. And he was just like, I don't think it really works that way. like, and the light bulb went off like, oh, yeah, I am just forcing something again, trying to feel in control of my life versus allowing that vision, allowing those choices to kind of come more naturally. When I look back at that year, I was like, oh, what ended up happening was it wasn't long after that birthday that I decided to launch my podcast. It just kind of naturally came to me to be like, yes, it's time to make this decision. And it does align to my big dream of speaking and that really, really big umbrella rather than put a fine point of like, I'm speaking in these places, in these spaces with these types of people, like we can just put pressure on having all the pieces of the puzzle put together in terms of these bigger decisions. Like I mentioned, like when my clients first come to me, they are usually in a situation where they feel like they need to make big decisions as well. Maybe they're hitting a milestone birthday or change is imminent. They're looking for a new job, or maybe they know they need to get their business back on a sustainable track and they know they need to make some big decisions about what they're going to be doing differently. Part of what being in these situations can be is they can make us feel overwhelmed. This overwhelm can have us outsource our decisions and we don't even realize it. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, we're stressing out about making a decision. So, we ask everybody else what they think. And everybody has different reasons for why they're doing this. And sometimes it's healthy. And sometimes it's helpful in your process of coming to your own conclusion. But I would say most of the time when we're struggling with a decision, the pathway to doing that is not about asking other people about it. It's about going inward for yourself. And like I mentioned, we can be looking for all the answers in this period of overwhelm when actually the best thing that we can do is to actually stop trying to figure it out. And that might even be for a couple of hours or a couple of days. But I've done this as well with myself and with others to say, gosh, this decision is really stressing me out. Let me just table it and give myself a break, give my mind a rest, and actually just recenter myself. The same thing can happen with relationships in our life, quite frankly, trying to figure out if we need to walk away from someone or not. And that relationship can be with a person or even food and beverage, any kind of relationship that you can think of. And what happens is we often really skip past the decision and go right to the how. How do I do that? If I make that decision, then how am I going to execute it? So, what I want you to do, one of my biggest tips is to ask yourself, have I skipped to the how before I've actually landed on the what? Because if you're doing that, then my suggestion is stop right in your tracks. Asking yourself about the how before you've actually landed that decision is going to throw you off. It's going to shake you because if you're not firm in the choice, then it will be hard to clearly see and understand the next steps and how to make that happen. So, just to say this again very clearly, if you are waffling on a decision, my big piece of advice is to not let yourself think about the how of that decision until you have fully landed on the decision that you know in your body, in your mind is the right thing for you. So I'll give you an example of this. There was a person in my life at one point, and frankly, I have many examples of this kind of scenario. But with this particular person, I was not sure about what to do about their role in my life. Do I allow them to be in my life? Do I cut ties? Do I shift the amount of time and energy that I put into that relationship? I didn't know. And over the course of 6 or 7 months, I wasn't trying to force that decision. I was going with the flow. I was making the smaller choices about the things that worked for me and what didn't work for me as it related to this relationship. Eventually, what ended up happening was my body told me very clearly this person isn't for you. I realized I felt very uncomfortable around them, and there was no peace in my mind or in my body, even when I thought about this person. And so within that, my decision became very clear. Okay, this person can't be in my life right now. And what I didn't go to is, well, for how long? Is this forever? Is it, a few months, whatever? It was just, I didn't allow myself to go into the how. How was I going to feel about this decision to like cut some ties here? I didn't let myself go into the, well, how is this going to work and for how long? And, all the things. And I let it be enough that I knew for sure right now this wasn't going to work. This is just one example of not focusing on the how, not focusing on like the other little decisions about, oh, well, what would I do if they called me or what would I do in this situation? Just not allowing myself go to that because I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Again, going back to like, I don't have a decision to make until I have a decision to make about possible things that might happen. And it doesn't mean that that decision you might have to make feels good. It might be a hard decision that doesn't feel good, but is the right one. And so it's really about honoring that. All right, I want to give you a moment to pause here and hear a message from one of my generous sponsors. One of the things I do here on the Unlock Lab is to help you get to know yourself better. And one aspect of this is understanding how your energy works. And that's why I love this tool called Human Design. It helps you understand your energetic blueprint so you can come back home to yourself. If you'd like to learn more about your unique energetic signature, my friend Holly is the founder of Human Design by Holly. And you can go to humandesignbyholly.com, that's with 2 L's, to download your free chart to find out which of the 5 human design types you are. And just like with astrology, you'll need your birth date, place, and time. You can also visit her website to book a one-on-one reading. These unique readings will help you understand your personal energetic signature, uncover your best strategy for making decisions, and find more self-acceptance. I highly encourage you to check this out if it calls to you. Unlock Lab listeners will get 25% off when booking your first reading. Use the code UNLOCKLAB, one word, all caps, when booking at humandesignbyholly.com to unlock your discount. For all the links and code, please see the episode show notes. All right, now let's get back to the episode. One of the big ideas around decision making is it's hard because we want to feel in control and we want to know that we are doing the absolute right thing. And again, that's where some of the pressure comes from is we put this pressure on ourselves to make perfect decisions, the best decision, the right decision, and we don't give ourselves the grace to realize actually there are no wrong decisions. Think about it. There are very, very few decisions in this life that have a forever impact. One of those is having a kid. Okay. That's a forever impact thing. But there's very few things that we can't either undo or make a different decision and go in a different direction. And so I just offer you this to really sit with, well, am I putting pressure on myself because I'm not giving myself permission to mess it up or make a mistake or realize that, oh, that path actually wasn't what was best for me. And so I need to make a new decision. Self compassion is really important here. So, what's the alternative approach to the forcing, to stressing, to feeling overwhelmed? One of the most famous things that I ask people is as I say, well, don't even think about like this decision as black and white. What would actually make this decision a hell yeah for you? And I've mentioned that in previous podcasts, but like in what scenario would this be a hell yeah or maybe even a hell no? So kind of thinking about it that way can be very helpful because what you're doing is you're taking the parameters out of the equation that you have in your head. Another alternative is to allow the puzzle pieces to come, to honor that you do have time and you don't have to make a decision right now. And obviously, we're super uncomfortable with that. We're super uncomfortable with the allowing. We know we have to make a decision. We want to do it now. We want to get it over with. We want to move on versus have the patience to wait for the clarity and to wait for perhaps even more information that you need to make a sound decision. The alternative approach then is to slow down. And part of slowing down is to listen to your body and to pay attention to what it has to say about the decision, not just what your pro and con list in your head has to say about it. I mentioned it before, but sometimes we have to clear our head and put the decision on the shelf for a while, even if that means 5 minutes, even if that means 30 minutes, even if that means 3 days or 3 weeks, because stressing out about decisions is not going to support us in making a decision. It's just going to cloud things. Okay, so an alternative to putting the decision on the shelf for a little while is to actually give yourself some space and to put on the hat and say, okay, let me pretend I'm going to say yes to this for the next 24 or 48 hours. And then pay attention to how you feel in that yes. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Does it feel good? What is your body doing? And then what you can do is say, okay, I'm going to put on the hat as if it were a no. And I said no. And then you can check in with the same questions. How am I feeling about that? Am I sad? Do I feel relief? And taking this approach to those big decisions can be really helpful because then you can really tap into the truth of how you feel about it versus get caught up in the quagmire of being confused because your body is doing one thing, your mind is telling you another thing, you're doing mental gymnastics, all the things. And sometimes just carving out the space for the alternative decisions that are possible can help you find the clarity and the truth in how you actually feel about it. So, another alternative approach to the normal way that we approach decision making is to stop asking everybody and their brother for their opinion. Now, obviously, it is helpful to get outside perspective with certain things. But if you are in this period of struggling to trust yourself, if you are in this period of really trying to tap into your own knowing, then my recommendation is to turn inward rather than continuing to ask other people what they think. And this is going to be hard for some of you because this might be a really big habit to break. If it is really hard for you, okay, let's just honor that. If you still want other people's opinions or if you just can't help yourself, then what I would do is pay attention to what you think and feel once you get the other person's response. Because in that, you will discover what you really feel. So if you're hearing somebody else's disappointment and you're upset about it, then that's telling you something. Like if you're upset somebody else is disappointed, That's going to tell you something about that decision. But part of this process of being more confident in your decision making at the end of the day is really about getting more deeply in touch with yourself and the truth of what you want and what you feel like is in the best interest for yourself and others in that situation. Part of having self compassion with making decisions is about recognizing that you also can change your mind. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves that once we make a decision is final and it is it. And that is not true. We can change our mind. We can make a different decision. We can go back and say, you know what? I rethought this. And I'm actually going to give you an example of that right now. So I had an opportunity to write an article for a magazine. I was really worried about the agreement that I had to sign. And I literally asked three people that I trusted, that understood contracts, understood the space. And I decided, no, I didn't want to take that risk. And I reached out to that person with this offer and I said, you know what? I just really can't. Like, I just don't feel comfortable with it. It was tough, because on the one hand, yeah, I did want to be able to write this article. On the other hand, I was worried about the agreement and the implications. And a couple weeks later, I I was in a conversation with some other folks and received some different input and some different perspectives on it. And I was like, oh, damn, did I shoot myself in the foot by saying no and turning it down? And then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go back to them and see if I can reopen that conversation and make it a yes. And of course, like there's swallowing your pride. There's like all the things that go along with changing your mind and all the stuff. And I went back to this person and I said, you know what? Actually, I've had some other conversations and I've gotten more comfortable with this agreement. Is the door still open to write an article for this magazine? And this person came back and said, yes, absolutely. Let's look at the timing. Perfect example of I made a decision, the best decision I could in that moment with the resources I had. And then later, I changed my mind. I got some more information. I changed my mindset and it was a yes. Sometimes this is the way it works. And sometimes part of making decisions is being bold enough to go back and say, you know what, I made that decision in the moment, but some things have changed and I'd like to make a different decision. Is that possible? Sometimes we just have to do that. Maybe we turned down a job and 6 months later, we're like, damn, you know what? I think that would have been really great for me. And we go back and say, you know what, is that position available? Or if it becomes available, I'd really like to be reconsidered for that, or whatever the case might be. But suffice it to say that we can take the pressure off of ourselves sometimes by acknowledging that, you know what, if I change my mind, if it's meant to be, I can always open that door again and see what's possible. I want to be clear about what I mean by making decisions confidently. It's not about how you are expressing your decision, communicating your decision to others. It's about self trust. It's about really honoring and believing you are making the best possible decision right now in this moment with what you know and with who you are right now. And the more that you ground into that truth, that even though that decision might be difficult, or even though you're not 100% sure if it's going to work out the way you want, you are 100% sure that you're making the best decision that you can right now. That is the crux of what this episode is all about. That is the crux of my advice to you, is to really tap into yourself and ask yourself, all things considered, am I making the best choice I can right now? And my guess is you are. You absolutely are. The other caveat that I want to share, because I talked a little bit about really shutting out the noise and shutting out the external. Again, this is a nuanced thing because sometimes we get in our own heads and we can't see the forest through the trees and we're making decisions based on perhaps baggage that we're bringing and we're not seeing things clearly. And sometimes we do ourselves a service by inviting other people into the conversation. But my suggestion around that is invite other people into the conversation once you feel really grounded in what you think the best choice is for you. Because once you are in that grounded place, you can be more open to other people's opinions without being super swayed. You can open up to other ideas and recognize more clearly if there's somebody projecting or there's something that they're not really understanding because you've already done a lot of the processing. And that's really what it comes down to is really doing that deep processing of the decisions. And I don't mean exhaustive pro con lists. I mean, really asking yourself, what is it that you want? Really tapping into yourself and saying, what is here for me? What is possible for what is here for me? What do I want to stay open to in this decision? These are the kinds of deep, work that you can do internally before looking for external sources to support you in evaluating the decision that you may have. Making decisions confidently is about a few core things, and I'll walk you through them, which some of this will be a little bit of a recap, but it's about getting out of forcing energy when you're making decisions. And there's a number of ways that I've talked about how you can do that. How do you get out of forcing energy? Maybe it's even changing environments. Maybe it's taking a pause, putting the decision on a shelf, taking the pressure off, finding more self compassion. Those are all ways to get out of forcing energy. The second piece is trust the part of you that feels confident in what's best for you. Because what ends up happening is there is a part of us that knows, but then there's another part of us that's combating that and arguing with it. Trust the part of you that does have a great sense of what that best decision is. The third piece of making decisions confidently is about shutting out external noise for at least a little while. It doesn't mean you may not ask some advisors. It doesn't mean you may not ask some mentors, but really shutting out the external noise the best you can in order to tap in to your own knowing and your own decision making processes. That's going to be super helpful. The other piece is I want you to consider what patterns you have from your past experience when you've made decisions that you feel good about. Because we all have different processes for how we make decisions. Let's just say you made a decision between like two houses at one point in your life and you absolutely love the house that you picked. It was absolutely the right decision. What you can do is go back and say, well, how did you make that decision? How did you know? Did it come to you while you were in the shower and not even thinking about it? Did you talk about it with a trusted friend and that helped you process? Was your initial gut response to the house you chose the answer that you went with? You maybe argued with yourself for a little while, but really your best decisions are made when you honor that initial gut reaction. That might be you. That may also not be you. You may also be the kind of person that's like, yeah, I had this like initial reaction, but actually I need to give myself time to get off of the emotional high of that and be in a more grounded place when I make decisions. That could be you too. These are all great clues for how you and your energy works in terms of your decision making processes. At the end of the day, I just want to remind you that you can't go wrong. You've got this. You have clearly made some amazing decisions in your life already. I mean, heck, you're listening to this podcast. That's an amazing decision. No, I'm kidding. But you got to where you are because of your decision making abilities. And so I just want to remind you that you've got this. You've got an amazing track record. You've made difficult decisions in the past. And you know what? Sometimes the decisions we make means we have a lesson to learn through that. And sometimes it means we have to grow through something. And sometimes it means we just beeline to what's in our best interest. But either way, it's not right or wrong. It just is what our path was meant to be. And I always say, what's meant for you won't pass you by. So if it doesn't feel right for you right now, that's okay. Because maybe it will come back around if it was really meant for you when you're actually ready for it. There are very few things that are permanent or that you can't come back to. And we can tell ourselves these stories about, well, there'll never be another opportunity or this chance will never come around again. That's all lies. That's inner critic limiting belief stuff. Take the pressure off, come back to trusting and listening to yourself, recognize when you actually have to make a decision versus when you're trying to force yourself to make a decision. give yourself permission to create space around that decision and tap into what your body is telling you about what feels good, what feels appropriate, what feels like the best right decision in that moment. I hope this was a helpful episode for you. And I'd love to hear from you about how you go about making decisions confidently. What supports you in that? You can reach out to me via a number of methodologies. They're all in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, if you got something from it, if it helped you think differently about perhaps some decisions in your life, please like, rate, and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. It would mean the world to me and it would help get this message to more folks. And of course, feel free to share this episode with somebody that you think is having a hard time making some decisions. Maybe this will help something click for them or give them a new tool in their toolbox for making decisions with a little bit more ease and a little bit more grace and self-compassion. All right, well, thank you so much again for being here. It's been an honor to be with you here in the lab, and ciao for now.